Shalom Rabbi Zai. I wanted to share an idea that I was very, very inspired by over Shabbos about the idea of how power corrupts. So in this past week's Parsha, Parshas Balak, Rashi cites a medrash, and the medrash asks the question, why did Hashem give nevuah and rest his presence on such an unclean evildoer, on such a rasha like Bilaam? So the Medrash says, because that way that the nations of the world will not be able to get off the hook for their behavior by saying, if we had prophets like the Jews had, of course we would have behaved better. Of course we would have behaved properly. So therefore, Hashem gave them a prophet and said, okay, well, here you have a prophet. Are you behaving any better? So Reb Chaim Kanievsky, in this beautiful Sefer Chumash, asks, and this question had been bothering me, so I was very excited when I saw that he wrote this question here. The question is, how does the fact that he gave nevuah, prophecy, to Bilaam address the complaint? The Jews, the prophet of the Jews, Moshe Rabbeinu, all the prophets that the Jewish people had, they were all righteous people, they were all saintly people, they were holy. Sorry about that. But the non-Jews were given a prophet who was greedy and wicked, Bilaam. How does the fact that you give the non-Jewish people a wicked and corrupt person to be the prophet, how would that answer their complaint? They'll just say, oh, you didn't give us a righteous prophet. You should have given us a prophet like Moshe Rabbeinu. So Reb Chaim explained that really in the outset, Bilaam too was of the finest character that could be found among the nations. That's an unbelievable idea. Before Bilaam came to power, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is explaining he was the finest person. He had the finest character among all the non-Jewish people in the world. When he was given the power of prophecy, however, he grew haughty and mendacious, and his character was thoroughly corrupted. And this showed the nations that their objections were baseless. Not only would being given the gift of prophecy not help them improve themselves, it would actually serve the opposite purpose. In other words, if you took the finest person among the non-Jews and you gave them some extra tools, and you see how that extra tools corrupted them, they corrupted it, it became a corrupted person, then if the non-Jewish people had any extra tools, it would only make them more corrupt, and it would only make more of a challenge. Why? Because power corrupts. So if you would have given them more prophets, it would not have been utilized properly. It would have just been abused and misused and abused. So I was thinking about this idea of how power corrupts, and I was thinking to myself, so what should a person do to avoid allowing power to corrupt themselves? So obviously you're going to say you have to study Musar, you have to work on your character development, but I was thinking about it, and perhaps I would like to suggest that maybe that's what this Mishna in Pirkei Avos in chapter 5, Mishna 22, maybe a deeper objective of that Mishnah is to answer this question. The Mishnah is talking about the traits, the character traits of the students of Avram Avinu versus Bilaam Harasha. And I was thinking that perhaps the Mishnah is telling us if you have the character traits of Avram Avinu, that will safeguard you from power corrupting you. Whereas if, God forbid, you have character traits of the disciples of Bilaam, then that could be a recipe for disaster, and power could corrupt you. So with that in mind, let's just review what those qualities are. It says that Avram Avinu's students had three qualities: ayin tova, a good eye; ruach nemucha, a humble spirit; and nefesh shafala, a restrained nature. And the students of Bilaam, they had an ayin ra, an evil eye; a ruach gavoa, a greedy nature; and a nefesh rechava. Ruach gavoa is arrogant spirit, and nefesh rechava is a greedy nature. I just want to make a few short points here from Rav Druk's beautiful Sefer HaChumash. Point number one, I'm just picking a couple points that spoke to me from here. I'm not going to read everything, but point number one is he was looking, how do you see that Bilaam had an evil eye? So one of the sources that he brought was this beautiful Orach Chaim HaKadosh, whose yahrzeit was this past Friday. And he says that the Orach Chaim says, what's the reason that Bilaam rose early in the morning? The pasuk says, "Vayalkam Bilaam baboker, vayomer el sari Balak lechu el artzachem, ki me'ein Hashem lasiti la'aloch imachem." Bilaam got up early in the morning and told Balak's officers that they have to go home because Hashem is not letting him go with him. Says the Orach Chaim, you know why Bilaam got up so early? He was afraid that the officers of Midian would want to eat a meal with him. Because he had an evil eye, he awoke early to send off those officers before he would have to provide a meal for them. When I read that, I was laughing so hard, and I said to myself, this is probably one of my favorite all-time Orach Chaims. A person with an evil eye, they don't want to, they can't even imagine having a meal with someone else. God forbid. It's the opposite of being a generous person. And then Avram Avinu, one point that I wanted to make over here with Avram Avinu is just that, what does it mean, humble spirit, and how do you see that? So Hashem promised Avram that his offspring would be like the stars of the heaven. And what was Avram Avinu's response? V'hemin b'Hashem v'yachshaveh lo tzedakah. Avram Avinu trusted in Hashem, and he considered it, the way I'm going to translate it, he considered this an act of charity. What does that mean? Even though God promised him something, Avram Avinu did not feel entitled to it. Avram Avinu felt that if Hashem does anything for him, it's an act of charity. And that is what is a humble spirit. And I was just so moved by that. And I was actually learning this morning this book, Living Emunah, on Parnasa from Rabbi David Asher. And I just read a beautiful story that really ties into this. Instead of going through the whole story, basically the bottom line is that there was a guy that was going to be going to jail for 20 years. And he was working with a rabbi to become more religious during the court case. And he was very nervous, and he was trying to be about tshuva, to do better. And basically, finally, after many months of the case dragging out and of him, learning more about Judaism and becoming more and more observant, he finally got sentenced for just 6 months of jail time. And when he got sentenced for 6 months of jail time, he called the rabbi up and he told him, and he was singing and dancing with joy, I got only 6 months of jail, hooray, I could have been in there for 20 years, I only got 6 months. Meanwhile, after the rabbi hangs up the phone, he gets another call. There was another guy who was all upset. Why was he upset? He was doing a side business, not his main business. On the side, he was doing a deal, and instead of getting paid, and the deal went through, instead of getting paid the $300,000 that he was supposed to get paid, He only got paid $200,000. So he was fuming and mad and everything. When the rabbi got home and his wife asked him how his day was, the rabbi observed something interesting. He said one man was sentenced to 6 months in prison, and he was dancing with joy. And another man earned $200,000 from a side deal that wasn't even connected to his regular job, and he was very upset. It's an interesting observation. The rabbi said it all depends on a person's feelings of entitlement. One person was expecting to spend 20 years behind bars. When he was told it was only going to be 6 months, he was overjoyed. The other man felt entitled to $300,000. When he only got $200,000, he was miserable. This is the nature of man. But if we recognize that everything Hashem gives us is a gift, and we are entitled to nothing, then we can always feel happy. The moment that we feel we should have something or we deserve something, then it becomes extremely hard to appreciate anything. Appreciating Hashem's blessing brings more blessing, but the appreciation must stem from true feelings of gratitude. Those will come about when we stop feeling entitled. I just love that so much. It's connected right in here to Avram Avinu, and I thought that this is a very important thing when you think about power corrupting a person. How do you avoid being corrupted? Well, one of the three qualities of Avram Avinu is a humble spirit, not feeling entitled, feeling very grateful for everything. And I definitely think that that's a very good midah to have that will help from being corrupted. The other two are Ayin Tova and what's the other one? Let's just remind. The other one is, so a good eye, humble spirit, and a restrained nature. A restrained nature. He didn't even want to benefit from something that was his own. Rabbi Druk says that his wife, Sarah, Avram Avinu's wife, Sarah, was one of the 4 most beautiful women ever in the world. That's based on the Gemara Megillah on 15a. And he only discovered her beauty after 70 years when he went down to Egypt. That even though he was married to one of the 4 most beautiful women in the world ever, he didn't even recognize her beauty because he didn't look at her. He didn't benefit, his reluctance to benefit from even her. It was his wife. He didn't want to benefit. He had a restrained nature. These are the qualities. And a good eye is that he even prayed for Sodom, even though they were wicked and deserved to get destroyed. He prayed for them that they should be spared, even though it ended up not working. But that's a good eye. And these are the qualities, I think, that will defend a person from power corrupting them. Just some thoughts. All right, have a great day.